Hey everyone, just coming to you with this public service announcement. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it is the easiest way to make a podcast. So let me explain. First and foremost, it's free to do so. You don't got to come out of your pocket. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you, so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and a whole bunch of others platforms. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. That's why I got on it. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. All right, peace. Peace. We are back once again with another episode of Masterminds with Brother Shemel. I am your host, Brother Shemel, and we are in part 5 of our series on Kabbalah, basically dealing with Elohim, the fall of man, and the Kabbalah. And so before I get into it, I just want to say thank you again, all of those who supported me throughout this year up until this time. And don't forget, for those who are not aware, the website is up and running, www.shemel.com. That's SHEM-EL.com, Shem-L.com. Be sure to get on that website. Check me out. You can actually listen to the podcast from there if you'd like. Also have products, videos, and a host of also blogs. We also have our community that you can join, where we'll allow people to share, just like a Facebook post. Facebook group similar to that, but it's totally private, where we can open and communicate, share our thoughts on our journey. So be sure to check that out. So without further ado, I'm going to get into the topic. This is, again, part 5, and this is dealing with action, the world of action, which is known as Assiah. ASSIAH. And this is the final of the 4 worlds. Remember, we spoke on Atziluth, the first one, Beria, Gezerah, and this is Assiah, which is literally means action. Okay, so of course, all of the worlds are based on a passage in the book of Isaiah, chapter 43, verse 7, which you can look up. We spoke about that earlier in the previous episode, and I want to get into the essence of the word Assiah, how it relates to another word that is spoken about often in the Moorish movement, in Moorish science, known as Asia, and some other things. So basically, this world of action represents purely material existence. Of course, it's likened to what we call in Moorish science the plane of things made manifest. So what I always like to do is start off with reading a section of the Circle 7, and I will do that, of course, going back to chapter 1, the creation and fall of man, and I will start where it speaks on the soul attributes, and it says as such: "And these soul attributes became a body beautiful, a multitude of lessons man must learn upon the plane of soul. And here he tarries many ages until his lessons are learned. Upon the boundary of the plane of soul, the ether began to vibrate slower still, and then the essences took on a final guard. the perfumes and odors and the true sensations and the all of love were clothed in flesh, and man was clothed in flesh. Perfected man must pass through all the ways of life, and so a carnal was full manifest, a nature that sprang forth from fleshly things. Without a foe, a soldier never knows his strength, and thought must be developed by the exercise of strength. And so this carnal nature soon became a foe that man must fight, that he might be the strength of Allah made manifest. Let every living thing stand still and hear. Man is the Lord of all the plane of manifest, of protoplast, of mineral, of plant, of beast, but he gave up his birthrights just to gratify his lower self. But man will regain his lost estate, his heritage, but he must do it in a conflict that cannot be told in words. Yea, he must suffer trials and tribulations manifold. But let him know that the cherubim and seraphim that rule the stations of the sun and spirit of the mighty Allah who rule the solar stars are his protectors and his guide, and they will lead to victory. Man will be fully saved, redeemed, perfected by the things he suffers on the plane of flesh and on the plane of soul. When man has conquered carnal things, his garb of flesh will then have served his purpose well, and it will fall, will be no more. Then he will stand untrammeled on the plane of soul, where he must full complete his victories. Unnumbered foes will stand before man upon the plane of soul. These he must overcome, yea, overcome them every one. Thus hope will ever be his beacon light. There is no failure for the human soul, for Allah is leading on and victory is sure. So I just want to stop there. So to give that context, it basically speaks of the mission of man, being on the plane of manifest. What is your purpose? When it speaks about perfected man must pass through all the ways of life. So we have to go through these things, and then also understanding of who we truly are, being the Lord of the plane of manifest, and how we gave that birthright up to gratify our lower selves, and how we have to regain it in a conflict that cannot be told in words. That is the journey of man. So understanding that, we have to get into what the word Assiah means and where it's rooted in. So some things I want to get into real quick and just touch on before we get into the etymology of that word. As I mentioned in previous episodes, each one of the worlds corresponds with various things. It corresponds with the tetragrammaton, 4 worlds, 4 letters, right? The Yad, He, Wahe. So in this case, the Assiah would correspond with the final He in that tetragrammaton. Okay? And also, the world of action, or Assiah, corresponds with the Sephirah of Malkuth, right? Which is the 10th Sephirah, the bottom Sephirah, the foundation on that Kabbalistic tree of life. Okay? So that's to be understood in that context. Also, it corresponds with the element of earth. So earthbound, the foundation. Okay, this is going to be key when I get into the aspect of the book of Genesis in a moment. Also, it corresponds with something known as Shekinah. Now, Shekinah is a word that is used commonly in the Christian church. So you hear terms about Shekinah glory. But the interesting thing is that this term, Shekinah, is not mentioned in the Bible. It doesn't occur once in the Bible. You will not find that word Shekinah. So that Shekinah actually is a mystical term. Okay, it comes from a Semitic root, which means to settle or inhabit, but it actually deals with a divine presence connected to the Almighty. Okay, it has very mystical terms in reference of that. Okay, so we'll probably do a whole episode on Shekinah. It's also dealing with the feminine principle as well. Okay, because Shekinah is actually a feminine word. Okay, so but getting back to Assiah, that actually ties in to the etymology, or I should say going into the Hebrew language. You will find that it goes back to the book of Genesis. It's tied into the root word of Asa. In the word Asa, which is actually 3 Hebrew letters, Ayin, Shin, Sin, and He, Ayin, Sin, and He, right, is number 6213, 6213 in Strong Concordance. And you'll find that it means many things in it, but I'll read some of it here. It means to do or make in the broadest sense, right? To appoint, to advance, to be at, to bear, bring forth, be busy. That's action, to be busy, right? To finish, to complete, to govern, to grant, keep labor. That's work, action, activity, to spend. So there's a lot of different ways that word Asa is used, right? Which is the root of the word Assiah, which is means action. So one of the things where you find is actually all in the first chapter of Genesis. And it starts first off when you go to Genesis chapter 1, verse 7. Okay? So in Genesis chapter 1, verse 7, it speaks about making the firmament, where Elohim made the firmament, or some would say the expanse. Okay? The word is used there first. That's the first time you see Asa used in terms of making. Then it's used in Genesis chapter 1, verse 11, where it talks about the yielding fruit, right? The trees yielding fruit. So now you get to Asa or Assiah, the world of action, being a world of fruition, things coming into fruition. Now this is very important in the context of manifestation, which we will talk about, and how you can use this concept of Assiah, the world of action, in your practices on manifesting things, taking things into manifestation. So the most important verse where it's used, and there's others verses as well where that term is used, but when it speaks about making man, which is, of course, one of the famous verses, chapter 1, verse 26, where it says, and God said, let us make man in our image and after our likeness, right? Now, of course, there's, in the questionnaire, the question is asked, can a man be a Negro, black, and colored? And the answer to that is no. And the following question is, why? And the answer to that is because man is made in the image and after the likeness of God Allah. That comes directly from Genesis chapter 1, verse 26. Now, the interesting thing is that in the Hebrew, you will literally, if you read the Hebrew, it literally will say, Elohim na'aseh Adam. or Elohim, or God, gods, remember that's plural, let us make man, Adam, let us make Adam. Now, keep in mind, as I've always spoken about, and this is in my book, Who is Elohim? The question is asked in the questionnaire, Moor's questionnaire, who is Elohim? Answer, Elohim is the seven created spirits that created everything that ever was, is, and ever more to be. Okay? So, literally in Hebrew, it starts off that verse by saying, Wayoma Elohim na'aseh Adam. And said, Elohim, let us make, or let us bring to action Adam. Na'aseh, let us make, or let us bring down to the world of Assiah, down to the world or the realm of action. Because keep in mind, what you're speaking about is the first physical man. But we know that's the fall of man, according to chapter 1 of the Circle 7. Because spirit man, which cannot die, is neither body nor soul. Man himself is not the body nor the soul. He is a spirit and a part of Allah. So man you've always existed as a part of the omnipotent. But Elohim in this verse is making a declaration to bring you down, man down into the plane of manifest in the image and likeness of God Allah, in the image and likeness, right? So that's key to understand that. And you definitely have to go into the Hebrew to get that understanding on how that connects. So understanding that will take you into the knowledge of why that is the case. As I just read prior about how man came from the spirit plane to the soul plane, right, and vibrated slower still, and then the essences took on a final garb. The perfumes and the odors and the true sensations and all the love were clothed in flesh. So in that same verse, it's talking about let them rule over the fish, over the sea and the fowl of the air, right, etc. So they become Lord of the plane of manifest. So your whole purpose in coming down here was to rule. But in you gratifying your lower self, you gave up that birthright. So now you really don't control anything. You're not even in harmony. We're not even in harmony with nature. Nature controls us, right? We fear diseases. We fear attacks from Mother Nature, from animals. You hear about the, all the natural disasters, earthquakes, hurricanes, tornadoes, brush fires, etc., etc. Now, there will be some who will say, okay, well, that's some HARP. That's from the government and things of that nature. But if that's the case, or if that's not the case, still, these are occurrences that happen within the realm of nature that is attacking man. Man is not in control, right? And man is in a constant state of fear because they are not in tune with the higher self. Understanding that to be Lord of the plane of manifest, you have to be in touch with that higher energy, your higher self, and those higher energies, those higher cosmic energies, which control the higher always controls the lower. That's the law of correspondence. As above, so below, as within, so without. So that realm of action that we were supposed to have, we are now no longer in that space because it's all about pleasure. It's all about desire. It's all about gratification of your carnal self, of the flesh, your lust, your greed, things of that nature. Getting caught up in the illusion, when there's a Maya and the Matrix and things of that nature. Another thing I want to just point, another side note, is that Assiah is also associated with the sign of Taurus, which is a fixed earth sign, the sign of the bull, right? And I spoke about the sign of Taurus in my book, How Many Days Are in the Circle. I spoke on it briefly. I didn't get a lot into the astrology aspect of it. I wanted to focus more on cycle ages, more so, but I did touch on a little bit of astrology. I did speak about astrology, and I just want to take this time, since we are talking about Assiah, and it is associated with the sign of Taurus. I want to go into that aspect, and I want to read from my book, How Many Days Are in the Circle, and basically speak about that. So one of the things in time that scientists employed was called a nanosecond, which is 1/billionth of a second. The prefix nano was introduced in 1947 at the 14th convention of the Union Internationale de Chimie, which was a international union in Europe that dealt with the discussion of time and measurements. And they introduced nano as a prefix for units for a one word originally, for 1 billionth. So it was a word originally meant little old man, from nanos, uncle, being the masculine form nana, form of nana, aunt. We still hear that today. Some people will call their elders nana, right? In fact, the name Nana is attributed to the ancient Sumerian god of the moon, whose symbol are the upright crescent and the bull. Okay, the bull is the symbol of the zodiac constellation of Taurus. Now, question: what is Taurus? Taurus, which is Latin for the bull and has the bull symbol of that little circle with what appears to be horns upon that circle representing the bull, is one of the constellations of the zodiac, which means it is intersected by the plane of the ecliptic. Okay, and Taurus is a massive and protuberant constellation in the northern hemisphere's winter sky. It is one of the constellations dating back to at least the early Bronze Age, when it depicted the position of the sun throughout the spring equinox. Its significance to the agrarian calendar impacted diverse bull characters in the myths of ancient Sumer, Akkad, Assyria, Babylon, Kemet, Greece, and Rome. And we're going to get into the Akkad in a minute, Akkadian culture. Several features exist that are of curiosity to astronomers. Okay, so Taurus hosts two of the closest open clusters to Earth, the Pleiades and the Hyades, both of which noticeable to the eye. At first scale, the red giant Aldebaran is the brightest star in the constellation. In the northwest section of Taurus is the supernova remnant Messier 1, more generally identified as the Crab Nebula. One of the nearest areas of dynamic star development, the Taurus Auriga complex, crosses into the northern section of the constellation. The mutable star T Tauri is the archetype of a category of pre-main sequence stars. Okay, so that's important to know. And all stars emit light, which travels at a constant rate of time. And we have to understand that. So with Taurus, and that connects with the symbol of the bull, the ruling planet of Taurus is Venus. It rules the second house in the zodiac. You're talking about average of, that's the time period of what? April 20th to May 20th. The element is earth. It's a fixed element. Okay. With the key word of possess. And when you deal with Taurus people, and the Taurus people, they usually are described as people who revel in the pleasures of life. They crave security and comfort, of relaxing and warmth. They value the senses and the enjoyment of material things. They are willful and sometimes can be stubborn. Okay, but there's a large capacity for kindness, and they are usually devoted and loyal people. Okay, so that's dealing with the sign of Taurus, and I just wanted to touch on that. Again, I don't get into the aspects of astrology as much as others, so I don't claim that to be my focus, but I want to put that in context with the world of action, which is the world of Assiah. Okay, because now that you understand that, and remember, you have the Taurian age, and that Taurian age in the Bible is represented with the story of Moses, the golden calf, right? And also, which ties into the second surah of the Qur'an of Mecca, right? Which happens to be Surah al-Baqarah, or the surah or the chapter of the cow, the degree of the cow, the calf, the heifer, right? So all of these are important. Make no mistake about it when you're dealing with that. Later on, I'm going to get into more of the manifestation aspects of the world of action, how it comes into play, and some practical realities pertaining to that, which is important to realize as well. So you're really dealing with the system of mundane creation, right? So when you're dealing with action, just taking all that into account, right? When you get into that last world, these are things where there has to be activity, right? It's this is things where it is ruled by, this world is actually ruled by a group of angels known as the Ophanim, right? Which refers to the wheels seen in Ezekiel's vision on the chariot. So if you go to Ezekiel chapter 1, verses 15 to 21, it will speak on those beings, the wheels. And again, the wheels are the circles, right? The circles. How many days are in the circle? 7 days. That's, again, go back to the book and go back into the lessons of that, keeping in that. But these beings are the Ophanim, which I'll get into a little later. They actually promote the context of human beings praying, right? Supporting human endeavor, combating evil. Again, that conflict that cannot be told in words. Okay, so now you have humanity being in a place where they feel the need to pray, send their prayers up. Okay, even when you deal in the beginning of Genesis, when Adam was created, he didn't pray. It wasn't until the creation of Seth. When you get into the creation of Seth, and I believe that's in Genesis chapter 4, verse 25, where it says, and Adam knew his wife again, and she bare a son. Enos, I'm sorry. That's 26. I'll go to 26. And to Seth, to him also there was born a son, and he called his name Enos. Then men began to call on the name of the Lord. It wasn't until the birth of Enos. Enos, right, deals with the human being, the Enosites, which are the forgetful ones. They forgot how to have direct contact with the Most High. So that's where prayer began. Enosites. So we'll get into more in our next half. Now, I just mentioned that when you get into Genesis chapter 4, verse 26, you get to the birth of one known as Enos. And it says, and to Seth, to him also there was born a son, and he called his name Enos. Then began men to call upon the name of the Lord. Now, Enos himself means man. It also is another name for man. But wait a minute. In Genesis chapter 1, verse 26, we also have a name for man, and that Hebrew name is Adam. So what's the difference? To put it simply, Adam at that point in time is still in direct communication with the Most High. They're talking directly. That is another stage of man where he's at. By the time you get to Enos, you now get to a man that is no longer in direct connection. That's why it says, then began men to call upon the name of the Lord. Now prayer has to begin. And here's another curious thing about this. Enos, or Enosh in Hebrew, which means man, is a mortal man. Not just a man, but also denotes a mortal man. But here's the context, right? I just talked about the prayer. It wasn't that mortal as into the sense that he can't live forever, because this Adam, the character of Adam in the Bible, also didn't live forever as well. But here's the difference. In Arabic, you have another term that's used for man or human or person, which is insan, which is directly related to the word Enos. Enos and San, right? They are cognates of each other, Hebrew and Arabic, and they both deal with the same root. The word insan in Arabic comes from a root word, nasiya, which means to forget. So the root word of insan in Arabic is nasiya, which means to forget. So this mortal being is a forgetful being. Remember, I mentioned in chapter 1 of the Circle 7 that man gave up his birthright just to gratify his lower self. And if you talk to the average person today, they don't know that they're supposed to be Lord of the plane of manifest. They don't know their potentialities, their potentials. They don't know of their capabilities on a cosmic level, what they're really capable of doing. So much so that if you try to speak to them, they'll say that you're crazy. Okay? They're forgetful. They forgot their rightful place. Also, what's interesting is that in the book of Genesis, just a couple of verses down from Genesis chapter 4, verse 26, you get to Genesis chapter 5, verse 2, which I always speak about in terms of Adam being the name of a group of people. It says there specifically in chapter 5, verse 2, male and female created he them and blessed them and called their name Adam in the day when they were created. So we already know, just by reading that, you know that Adam is denoting a group of people. But what's even more important is that the Hebrew word for Adam is not for Adam, I'm sorry, for male is Zakar. It actually says Zakar wa Nekaybaw, right? Nekaybaw is for female, translated into female. Zakar is translated into male. Now, in the Strong Concordance, you will find that Zakar, in this context, is number 2145. Okay, Zakar, right, is male, denotes the male. Okay, and we're going to get into gender as well. The law, the principle of gender in the teachings of the Kybalion. So this is important. Now, you go back a few numbers to number 2142, okay, which is in the Strong Concordance, the Hebrew lexicon, Zakar, which has the same three letters, Zain, Kaf, and Resh. They both have the same three letters, but they're used in different contexts. It means, Zakar there means to remember, to recall, right? To bring back to memory, to record, to recount. So, male, the male of the male and female that was created and called Adam in the day that they were created, when it speaks about it in Genesis 5, because it's recapping the book of the generations of Adam. They're called Adam in the day that they were created. But by the time you get to Enos, who was also man, he is mortal, and the root of that word is rooted in forgetfulness. So you forgot how to communicate directly with the divine by the time you get to Enos, the Enosites. So this is all the deeper meanings of these scriptures that you won't normally hear. Now, so that gets into the aspect of gender, which is very important that I want to talk about. Because when you get into the world of action, the world of Assiah, right, you also want to know about gender, because gender deals with activity. And I'm going to express to you how that is the case. It's very important that we speak on this. So again, I'm going to read in reference to the Kybalion, which I also have this in my book, How Many Days in the Circle. Okay. It's very important. So the gender is actually the seventh principle mentioned in the Kybalion. Also, another side note in Gematria, Zayin, which is the first letter in Zakar, is number 7. So all this it has significance. It corresponds. So I'm going to read this excerpt from a chapter in the Kybalion entitled Gender, which is the 7th principle. Gender is in everything. Everything has its masculine and feminine principles. Gender manifests on planes. The great 7 Hermetic principle, the principle of gender, embodies the truth that there is gender manifested in everything, that the masculine and feminine principles are ever present and active in all phases of phenomenon, on each and every plane of life. At this point, we think it well to call your attention to the fact that gender, in its Hermetic sense, and sex, in the ordinarily accepted use of the term, are not the same. The word gender is derived from the Latin root meaning to beget, to procreate, to generate, to create, to produce. A moment's consideration will show you that the word has a much broader and more general meaning than the term sex. The latter referring to the physical distinctions between male and female living things. Sex is merely a manifestation of gender on a certain plane of the great physical plane, the plane of organic life. We wish to impress this distinction upon your minds for the reason that certain writers who have acquired a smattering of the Hermetic philosophy have sought to identify this seventh Hermetic principle with wild and fanciful and often reprehensible, theories and teachings regarding sex. The office agenda is solely that of creating, producing, generating, etc., and its manifestations are visible on every plane of phenomena. It is somewhat difficult to produce proofs of this along scientific lines for the reason that science has not as yet recognized this principle as of universal application. But still, some proofs are forthcoming from scientific sources. In the first place, we find a distinct manifestation of the principle of gender among the corpuscles, ions, or electrons, which constitute the basis of matter, as science knows the latter, and which, by forming certain combinations, form the atom, which until lately was regarded as final and indivisible. The latest word of science is that the atom is composed of a multitude of corpuscles, electrons, or ions, the various names being applied by different authorities, revolving around each other and vibrating at a high degree and intensity. But the accompanying statement is made that the formation of the atom is really due to the clustering of negative corpuscles around a positive one, the positive corpuscles seeming to exert a certain influence upon the negative corpuscles, causing the latter to assume certain combinations and thus create or generate an atom. This is in line with the most ancient Hermetic teachings, which have always identified masculine principle of gender and feminine poles electricity. Now, a word at this point regarding this information. The public mind has formed an entirely erroneous impression regarding the qualities of the so-called negative pole of electrified or magnetized matter. The positive and negative are views wrongly applied, or very wrongly applied, to this phenomenon by science. The word positive means something real and strong, as compared with a negative, unreality, or weakness. Nothing is further from the real facts of electrical phenomena. The so-called negative pole of the battery is really the pole in and by which the generation or production of new forms and energies are manifested. There is nothing negative, quote unquote, about it. The best scientific authorities now use the word cathode in place of negative. The word cathode coming from the Greek word root, meaning descent, the path of generation, etc. From the cathode pole emerge the swarm of electrons or corpuscles. From the same pole emerge those wonderful rays which have revolutionized scientific conceptions during the past decade. The cathode pole is the mother of all of the strange phenomena which have rendered useless the old textbooks and which have caused many long accepted theories to be relegated to the scrap pile of scientific speculation. Okay, so the cathode or negative pole is the mother principle of electrical phenomena and of the finest forms of matter as yet known to science. So you see, we are justified in refusing the term negative in our consideration of the subject and in insisting upon substituting the word feminine for the old term. The facts of the case bear us out in this, without taking the Hermetic teachings into consideration. And so, we shall use the word feminine in place of negative in speaking of that pole of activity. Okay? Now, I can go further and further on. So, but the point that I want to go into here is specifying that gender deals with activity. So that brings a whole new meaning when you get into that word Assiah, right, in the book of Genesis. Because when you deal with the book of Genesis, keep this in mind, you are now dealing with the aspect of what we have with the actual action of, male and female. And even the word Asa is used in Genesis chapter 5, verse 1. Okay? So when you get into that actually there, it will say in the Hebrew aspect, this is the book of the genealogy of Adam in the day that created man in the likeness of God, he made him, right? When it says, and in the likeness of God, he made him, that he made is Asa, right? So you want to keep that clear. In the likeness of God made he him, I should say. In the likeness of God made he him. So that made he him, that made is Asa. So again, we're going back. That takes you back to Genesis chapter 1, verse 26. So then it goes on in the next verse to explain the making. The making is the male and female. Gender, the principle of gender, the seventh Hermetic principle, the realm of activity, the masculine and the feminine, the yin and the yang, right? Not one being better than the other, but simply the context of understanding how things work, the duality, going from the one into the two, and then really which brings in the three: man, woman, child, knowledge, wisdom, understanding, right? Wisdom, will, love, etc., etc. And this is important. These are definitely important things to understand in the context of what we speak about with the realm of action. Now, this also deals with manifestation. I want to put this in context with manifestation, okay? Because this will actually help you with the application of this, right? There's a verse in the Bible that says, whatsoever thy hand findeth to do, do it with all thy might. That's Ecclesiastes chapter 9, verse 10, right? Again, action, right? So you understand that looking at work, that action as an external expression of the internal desires, right? So action, activity, getting from the realm of creation of thought and the formation into the soul, which gets into the feeling, the emotion, taking it from emotion, energy and motion into, which is the potential energy, into the kinetic energy, that energy into manifestation, right? We have to understand that this is where the act or the process of how manifestation works. So you do have to visualize, you do have to see things as a reality, and live in the end, so as somebody would speak it into existence, and have the feeling, right? And the feeling. But from the feeling, there has to be some steps of action. You can't just sit in a recluded place and then whatever you want will just come to you. There has to be some action and form, because we're living in the realm of action. Now, this deals with energy, okay? So the dictionary describes energy as the power by which anything acts effectively to move or change things or accomplish any result, right? Or it's the power in active exercise. Now, we speak in more science that power is an illusion. It's a manifest of force, which it is, right? And I'm going to read that to give context. But this power is necessary, just like the body is an illusion itself, but it is necessary on the plane of manifest. Okay, so I want to read that. So, and that's chapter 7. Okay, starting with verse 13. Man is the breath made flesh. So truth and falsehood are conjoined in him, and then they arrive, and naught goes down, and man as truth abides. Again, Lamas asks, what do you say of power? And Jesus said, it is a manifest, is the result of force. It is but naught. It is illusion, nothing more. Force changes not, but power changes as the ethers change. Force is the will of Allah and is omnipotent. And power is that will and manifests, directed by the breath. There is a power in the winds, a power in the waves, a power in the lightning stroke, a power in the human arm, a power in the eye. The ethers cause these powers to be, in thought of Elohim, of angel, man, and other thinking things direct the force. When it has done its work, the power is no more. The work is the action. So the power has to function in action, but once it is done, it is no more. Just like in chapter 1, once the body has served its purpose of you conquering your foes, then it is no more. So a problem with us, a problem with human beings, is that we tend to be emotional, stay emotional. And this is not a slight at any gender, but we commonly refer to the female gender as being more emotional than men, even though men are emotional as well. Now, its function is that women are more in tune with their feelings. They're more linked with intuition, which actually takes them closer to the soul plane and more to level up to spirituality. However, in terms of manifesting things, the man is always looked at as the go-getter. That traditionally he was the breadwinner and things, the hunter, etc. throughout history, etc. He was the person always always active, out getting it. The woman in history, I'm not saying now, but was always viewed as the person who stayed home and maintained the home, right? Why am I saying this? Am I saying this to bring any archaic views on society? No, I'm saying it on a metaphysical level, that the internal is the soul, right? And that's feminine. Even in the Circle 7, where it speaks about the soul, it speaks about the soul as a she, okay? That's the gender, okay? Principle of gender. And the males are active. So by the time you get into the plane of action, this physical plane, it's all about work by the sweat of your brow, etc., etc. So what happens is, because we forgot how to communicate directly with the divine, we digress not only to Adam, but from Adam to Enos, right? Now we respond, or I should say we don't even respond, we react. Okay? As one Rosicrucian master stated, and I'm paraphrasing when I say this, there's a difference between an emotionally motivated thought and a thoughtfully motivated emotion. So that deals with the focus. It's like people are reacting without thinking. Okay, it's based on how you feel. If you feel a certain way, that's why people get real irritable, real angry. They just do things that has no. You'd be like, why would they do that? They're operating off of emotion. They don't know how to control the emotion through conscious thought. And you have that energy, right? You have that energy in the play, and they don't know how to channel the energy. Okay, so now when you deal with that, you understand what you're dealing with in manifestation. So now the object is to control the emotions. That's your greatest block on a lot of things in spirituality, is being overly emotional. And you become overly emotional by becoming overly physical, gratifying the lower self. You're attached to things of the carnal. Okay? When you get into your spiritual practice, you control your emotions. So this is very key to know the difference. To manifest things, you have to be in control in your emotions, because your emotions will sway you back and forth. Okay? And to be able to remove yourself from the emotion mentally so that you can operate in force and not in power. Okay, now that may sound kind of complex, but it's truly what needs to be done in the context, because now we're in a state where we're no longer consciously at will communicating with our divine self, with our higher self, with the God within us, if you will. Okay. We now been conditioned to pray to someone or something or someone's or some things outside of you, which is cutting you off. So in the realm of action, we have to get to that. Also, I want to get into, before I forget, I said I was going to get into that. The word Assiah, Hebrew word Assiah, Hebrew, keep that in mind, is connected with the word Asia. And this is very important, because in our Circle 7, in the back of it, in the back cover of the Circle 7, the last words you will see is the uniting of Asia. Okay. Now, most people view Asia as being a continent, right? And those of us who are familiar with the different countries of Asia, China, India, etc., right? Then you have Southeast Asia, Malaysia, the different countries, Japan, etc. There is also something to be said about that word. The etymology of the word, though there's various theories about the word, goes back to an Akkadian word, asu. Asu means to rise, to go out, to rise, like the rising of the sun. Okay, that's still action, activity. Akkadian is a Semitic language, just like Hebrew is a Semitic language, and all those languages, Semitic languages, fall under the Afro-Asiatic family. In the Moorish movement, there's also said that at one time the whole planet was Asia, and that Moors are Asiatic, meaning we are of the Asiatic race, the original man from Asia. So that means we are the first physical man on this plane of manifest Assiah, which incarnated on the world of Asia. And that's key to make note of. So Asia, Assiah has a direct relationship in that context on a metaphysical level. So this realm of action that we're living on, the world of Assiah, is something to be mindful of, to note that when you're conscious in your thought, you can bring the thought into emotion with control, and then from emotion and focus into a realm of action to manifest things, right? And what you'll do is that action will create attraction, right? So that you no longer respond or react, but you respond, because God is responsible. And with that, I say peace and love.